Lan Wangji noticed that while Wei Wuxian had followed him back to the cloud recesses, his free-spirited and unrestrained soul seemed to have been left behind in the rippling lotus ponds that nurtured him. In class, not only did Wei Wuxian stop dozing off and daydreaming, he refrained from dragging Lan Wangji into causing trouble. He even began listening attentively to the lectures, although his posture remained as crooked as a vine. Nevertheless, he was focused and answered every question, which truly made the teachers look at him in a new light. Even Lan Qiren was astonished and couldn't find any faults in him. However, due to Wei Wuxian's notorious past, he remained apprehensive, fearing that Wei Wuxian might be deliberately scheming a grand plan to make a fool of him. As a result, he spent a period of time in a state of constant vigilance, suspecting trouble at every turn. After observing Wei Wuxian closely for a while, Lan Qiren noticed that this boy, who he once considered beyond help, seemed to have genuinely turned over a new leaf. He appeared to be ashamed of his past actions and had since calmed down, no longer indulging in wild antics. Although there were still some minor flaws that displeased people, the fact that Wei Wuxian had not been punished to kneel in the ancestral hall since returning from Lotus Pier was indeed a significant improvement. Lan Qiren was greatly relieved, thinking that Lan Wangji had finally gained some enlightenment after his trip to Lotus Pier. He believed that Lan Wangji had mastered the art of managing his partner and was beginning to show the maturity and decisiveness expected of someone about to start a family. However, Lan Wangji himself wasn't quite so happy. He felt like himself. The once much desired and coveted delicacy had lost its appeal. In the first couple of days after their return, he would take a bath and sit on the bed at the appointed hour, wearing only a thin, almost see-through inner garment, quietly waiting for a while. When Wei Wuxian finally finished his tasks and came over, he gave Lan Wangji a quick peck on the lips like a dragonfly skimming the water, and said, "Lan Zhan, good night." Yawning, Wei Wuxian slipped under the covers and fell asleep immediately. Lan Wangji, feeling a bit perplexed, wondered if he had done something wrong. He then removed his clothes belt and positioned himself in the middle of the bed, lying firm like a big pillar, hoping his intentions were clear. Short of writing "Wei Ying, I want you" on his face, he did everything to make it obvious. Wei Wuxian certainly noticed the difference in Lan Wangji's behavior. "Lan Zhan, your belt isn't tied properly," Wei Wuxian said considerately while yawning. He adjusted the belt for him and then, despite noticing the pillar-like presence, continued to slip into bed and sleep. Lan Wangji finally realized something was off. He felt too embarrassed to directly express his desires to Wei Wuxian, so he merely hugged him from behind. Wei Wuxian seemed completely oblivious to Lan Wangji's intention, simply adjusting himself into a comfortable position and dozing off without any further thought. Lan Wangji thought that perhaps he hadn't been clear enough. He kissed Wei Wuxian's neck a few times and nudged his thigh with his knee. Finally, Wei Wuxian noticed these little movements and turned his head to look at Lan Wangji carefully. Lan Wangji's light-colored eyes were filled with a small, hopeful expectation. "Lan Zhan, you're moving around behind me like a rabbit. How am I supposed to sleep? If you're not tired, find something else to do. Don't keep bothering me. I'm really exhausted." Lan Wangji, feeling downhearted, reluctantly let go of him and lay by himself honestly. He thought that Wei Wuxian had just returned from Lotus Pier and was truly tired, having no mind to play around. However, little did he know that from that day onward, the situation not only didn't improve, but it got worse. Having missed quite a few lessons during their absence, they had to catch up vigorously after their return. Wei Wuxian didn't complain at all. Instead, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to his studies. Whenever he had a free moment, he would diligently work on his assignments at his desk. Before Lan Wangji took a bath, Wei Wuxian was working on his assignments. After Lan Wangji finished his bath and came out, Wei Wuxian was still working on his assignments. By the time it was late at night and supposed to be time to rest, Wei Wuxian was still by candlelight, deep in thought. He bit his pen so intensely that it tasted like malt sugar. Strangely enough, he managed to keep working until he was so tired that he fell asleep right at the desk. Lan Wangji had to carry him to the bed, only for Wei Wuxian to suddenly sit up straight. It was only when Lan Wangji extinguished all the candles and lamps that Wei Wuxian seemed to be turned off like a switch and languidly fell asleep. Despite appearing to be completely focused on his studies, the progress was incredibly slow. Sometimes, Lan Wangji would sit beside him and watch, seeing that after a long time, Wei Wuxian hadn't written a single word. He even caught him daydreaming with a blank head, making one suspect that he was pretending to be diligent to avoid certain things. The result of such hard work was that as soon as he got into bed, Wei Wuxian would fall asleep instantly, like a worn-out farmer after a day's labor. Every time Lan Wangji came to carry him, Wei Wuxian would be in a deep sleep, lying still like a corpse, making it difficult for him to do anything. That night, the long candle in the silence room shone brightly. At one end of the desk, Wei Wuxian rested his chin on one hand while holding a pen with the other. His eyes swept back and forth over the open, collected essays of righteous principles, though he made sounds of boredom with his mouth. His gaze was leisurely and relaxed. The family rules, which used to give him a headache after just one glance, now seemed like random storybook tales bought from street vendors. Unremarkable in literary quality and bland in plot. Meant merely for casual entertainment, neither here nor there. He lightly tapped his pen on his temple, finding one or two sections that still held a bit of interest. After pondering for a moment, he wrote down his thoughts with some genuine feeling, to be submitted as his weekly reflections to Lan Qiren. In the past, Wei Wuxian completed this assignment with tears in his eyes, hugging on to Lan Wangji's legs. For every sentence he wrote, he would whine and complain, as if his very soul were wounded and he needed to touch his husband for comfort and reward, like candied fruit, given as consolation for taking bitter medicine. Only after recharging from the touch could he muster the strength to continue to the next sentence. On the other end of the desk, the human candied fruit, Lan Wangji, was exceptionally neglected. An hour had passed and he remained untouched, his pristine self unblemished. His clothes were meticulously tied, his collar perfectly aligned, with no improper exposure or opportunity for misconduct. As if worried that Wei Wuxian might sulk over the bitter medicine and feel stifled, this candied fruit impatiently scooted closer to him, letting his crossed legs unintentionally or intentionally touch Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian's pen tip was nudged askew, and he uttered a soft, looking down to see what happened. Thinking Lan Wangji didn't have enough space, he shifted an inch to the side and then resumed his focused writing. Lan Wangji, seemingly deeply hit, held his book with rigid hands, frozen in mid-air. A quarter of an hour passed without him flipping a single page. In the past, even before this point in time, Wei Wuxian would find all sorts of excuses to cling to Lan Wangji, devising various ways to remind him that even little rabbits had a more fulfilling married life than they did. Wei Ying, it's almost high time. Lan Wangji's handsomely held Buddhist scripture suddenly seemed obtrusive and was discarded without hesitation. Its owner's gaze flickered slightly, and his tone became uncharacteristically hesitant. Without lifting his head, Wei Wuxian responded, "I haven't finished writing yet. Just a little more time. If you're tired, go ahead and sleep first." Lan Wangji's fingers twitched within his sleeve as his gaze lingered on Wei Wuxian. He seemed on the verge of saying something, but the words seemed difficult to utter. It wasn't his fault. Ever since they got married, he had never needed to take the initiative. Those who have been spoiled often find it harder to take the first step than they imagined. However, Lan Wangji was ultimately not a wooden monk. Even if he had never eaten pork, he had seen pigs run. Moreover, he had been with Wei Wuxian for such a long time, receiving his daily consistent teasing. If eroticism was a tribulation in cultivation, then he had already experienced much. Recalling carefully, he had often fallen into it unknowingly before, imitating exactly one or two past experiences should do. With this thought, Lan Wangji decided to take the initiative. Moments later, a plate of fresh grapes glistening with water droplets was placed beside the desk. Slender jade-like fingers plucked a plump green grape and brought it to Wei Wuxian's lips. "Wei Ying, have a grape." Second young Master Lan's first time taking the plunge didn't quite hit the mark. His words were plain and straightforward, each one pronounced with precision, lacking any of the tender and seductive ease that Wei Wuxian had when feeding him. It was as if he were feeding a small animal, stiff and awkward. Although it missed the mark a bit, his deep and magnetic voice added a touch of undeniable cold arrogance to his tone that made it difficult to refuse. Wei Wuxian was slightly taken aback, his gaze lingering on Lan Wangji's pale eyes for a moment. Without objection, he opened his mouth and ate the grape, mumbling a muffled, "Thank you." He then returned his attention back to his homework.